Welcome back to the Neighbors Podcast. Today is my friend Carrie Williams. I'm calling her my leadership guru. She is just so wise in all things leadership and cultivating calling. We talk about how to be a healthy leader. What are some signs if you're operating from a place of unhealth? Maybe you don't know what your unique calling in the kingdom is, and she kind of gives some advice on how you can take steps towards that. I seriously could have talked to her for hours. I was just soaking in all of the wisdom. She is bold and courageous and an incredible leader, mom, wife, disciple, all of the things. I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. So here it is with Carrie. Carrie, welcome to the Neighbors Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I am so thrilled to be here, and I absolutely love this podcast and what you're doing and the purpose behind it. So it is a humble honor to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. And your hat says I love Jesus, so we are about to talk about Jesus today.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so before we get into all the incredible things you're doing and your impact in the leadership world, church world, I've told you this before, but I just want everybody to hear it on the podcast. I have a bit of like a mom crush on your daughters, which I don't even know how to like really say that in not a creepy, weird way. But your daughters are, one's about to be, what you said, 17 this week.
Correct.
And 19. And we have two daughters who are 2 years apart, and they're 2.5 and 6 months old. So I look at you guys and I'm like, that's where we want to be, because I know Taylor more than Kaya, but Taylor is just this blooming woman, and she can talk to adults, likes to talk to adults. She's worshiping with her hands up on the front row at church, eager and hungry for the Lord, and likes hanging out with you guys and likes her parents still.
Yes. I'm so thankful.
Well, how did you do it?
Oh, goodness. I don't think that there's an honest recipe to any of that. Every kid's different, and every set of parents are different. And I think we're all uniquely made and created to be exactly what those kids need in order to thrive in the Lord. And so the first thing I would say is be true to who you are. Don't try to do or be like anyone else. Like, be who God created you to be as an individual, as a human, with your kids. And then secondly, I think my number one goal always has been with them to just be the safest place in the entire world for them. That is something that we've drilled in them from young, just saying, hey, you're going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen, but we're the safest place in the world for you to make those mistakes, because we will always love you. We will always be here to help you get better at the things that you feel like you're not good at. We'll always be here to help you pick up the pieces when there's pain involved. And then the other goal has always been to just be close. Like, no matter what, I want my girls to be close to me, to know, again, that I'm that safest place. But I want that to be reflected in how close we are. And so my biggest thing has always been relationship. Have a relationship with your kids. Like, just know them as individuals and humans, and spend time cultivating a personal relationship with your kids.
Which it seems almost like obvious when you say it, but then when I think about it in practice, sometimes that can get a little blurry, especially when they're little, because there's so much, you feel like there's so much parenting happening sometimes, and you're honestly sometimes just trying to get through the day without anybody losing their marbles.
Yes.
And you kind of forget to have the moments of fun or the moments of lightness where you're just purely playing together.
Yes. Well, I would even say in those moments, the harder moments, there's always a reason behind the hard. I mean, kids are no different than full-grown adults, right? So if my husband Ben and I, we have a moment of conflict or something, or he says something where I'm like, wait, I will take the time, obviously, to figure out why. Why are you reflecting that right now? What's really going on under the surface that made you respond that way? Now, kids don't have kind of that emotional intelligence yet, right? And they're still learning themselves. But it's also part of our job to sit and understand, where's that coming from? Why? What's the why behind the rebellion, or the why behind the tantrum, or I mean, one time, one of my children, I won't say who, threw this fit in Target. I mean, it was one of those lay on the floor, screaming, arms flailing. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am that mom right now. That, where other people were coming and looking at what was happening. Like I was trying to kill my kid or something. And it was, I raised her exactly the same way as the other one. And it was that moment of something else is going on the inside of her that's causing this moment. And I need to understand why rather than just correct it. Because if I can't understand the why behind it and correction is just involved, I'll never help her be able to navigate as a parent how to not get to that place again where you're throwing yourself on the Target floor and completely embarrassing me.
We all have the Target horror stories.
Oh, gosh. Woo.
Target is where tantrums happen.
I mean, for parents too. So
for parents too. Okay, so let's talk about what you do in ministry. Can you just give us? I know you've been in a lot of different roles of influence at local churches, ministries. You've kind of done the gamut of ministry. Can you just give us a high level of your journey in ministry?
I can. So first, I want to just clarify my definition of ministry.
Yes.
Every person's a minister of the gospel.
That's
if you know Jesus, you're leading people to him in some form or fashion, and therefore you are a minister. And so I want to clarify that there's a difference between vocational ministry, where you're getting paid to tell people about Jesus.
That's right.
and then you're just living out of who you are. And that is ministry. And that really, I think, is where people flourish the most.
For sure.
So I just want to be clear about that.
Great. That's great.
Because everyone listening, you are a minister of the gospel if you know Jesus. And so you are in ministry. Tag, you're it, sucker. Yeah. But my journey includes lots of years of just following Jesus. I mean, when I met him, I specifically remember him clearly telling me I was going to point people to him the rest of my life. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't grow up in church. And so I just decided I'll say yes and just follow wherever you lead. And that led me down the path of working on multiple churches, some nonprofits, planting a church here in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where Allie and I are recording right now. And then stepping into some other nonprofits, launching a ministry that helped equip and empower women to fulfill their call. That led me into some of my current roles.
And so what do you currently do now?
So currently, I am the executive director of Exponential Next, which is a part of Exponential. It is an organization, an international organization that ultimately serves the church to help them become multipliers. So a multiplier is a healthy disciple maker or a healthy disciple maker champion who is championing. Say that word 3 times. Say it.
Championing. You have to go slow.
Championing reproduction. So we want to see the gospel be reproduced and multiplied around the world. And so we get the privilege of serving churches all over the world in that context.
Incredible. Okay, so if you look back over your journey in vocational ministry, but you just look back at the last, I don't know. So how long have you been in vocational ministry?
Oh, goodness. 31 years.
Okay. So if you look back over the past 31 years, what steps do you see that you took, or disciplines that you had, or people in your life? And it's probably all of the above, but what are some of the things that got you from that starting point 31 years ago to this seat you're in now?
So let me start off by saying just some clarifying definitions. So I think a lot of people look at their life and go, I wonder what I'm called to. And they think of calling as like, one day I'm going to reach my call, and I'm going to walk it out, right? And I want to just kind of bring that down into simple terms. I think we are all born with the same purpose. Our purpose is to know God and make him known. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you already know him or not. You're still born with that same purpose. Every person on the face of the earth has the purpose of knowing God and making him known. That never changes, no matter the season, no matter what we're doing. Calling is the unique way in which we fulfill that purpose in any given season.
Yes.
So your calling changes from season to season. Now, sometimes seasons are longer than others, right? So when we launched the Church of 1122, I was there for a long season. I was called to it for certain. Being a mom, I am called to disciple my children. I am called to that. I will until the day that I die. But prior to them, that wasn't part of my calling, right? Like I didn't have children. And so our calling changes depending on our unique season and where God places us during that season. Wow. And so that's the first thing I want to say is that our calling is not something that we are trying to strive towards. Our calling is happening right now.
Come on.
And it's up to us whether we say yes or we say no to fulfilling that calling in this season. I think for me, looking back at kind of what brought me here, my rhythm has always been to say yes when God calls me. And so I think about Jesus calling the disciples out of the boat to come walk on the water. Bunch of guys in a boat, all of them had the same opportunity. Peter was the only one who said yes and decided to step out on the water with Jesus. And I look back at my life and go, well, what's the difference? Like, why am I where I am? You know, why do I get to have amazing conversations and help cultivate influence among the big C church in the United States of America and around the world? I mean, that's crazy to me. Like if you knew me really well, you'd be like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. But I look back and I go, it's because I said yes every time he called me out of the boat.
Okay.
And he didn't just call me out of the boat. He called out everyone out of the boat. But I think the difference is in our yes. It's just saying yes and taking the scary step, whatever that looks like in your own context, just to say yes to that next scary thing or that next risk-taking thing or that what if. You know, a lot of us kind of live with a what if or like, man, what would it look like? What if you said yes to that thing and you tried it?
Have you always been that kind of person, or did you develop that?
I think it was kind of developed. Okay. I mean, in earlier stages of my life, there weren't a ton of opportunity for kind of risk taking, right? I mean, it was just, you know, I grew up, I didn't know Jesus. I was, you know, kind of a scrappy underdog, and
well, I mean, maybe that has something to do.
I mean, it could have built some things in me for sure. But I do think that at any given point, any of us, regardless of our wiring or our life experience, we have the opportunity to say yes.
For sure.
And I'm not talking about the kind of yes that overextends somebody and burns them out. I mean the yes to that thing that you know that God's been just, you know, putting right in front of you, knocking on your heart about, and I just look back and I've just always said yes.
Do you feel like the yeses have gotten easier?
No.
Or harder?
I think they've probably been equally as scary throughout my life, but I think the beautiful part of it is to be able to turn around and go, I see God's consistency in my yes.
Right.
I think the other thing when I've kind of stepped back and asked the Lord, you know, why did you call me to do this? I literally have heard the Lord say, because you seek me first and you seek me most. And so I've tried to stick with that in all of my yeses. Like, God, I'm going to seek you first in all the things and truly mean it. And I'm going to seek you most. I believe in wise counsel. I have lots of godly people around me that I go to on any given occasion for decision making and discernment and input and on all kinds of things, from leadership to children to, you know, my health. I mean, you name it. But at the end of the day, I seek him most. And so he is the one that I go to the most. I don't, you know, that's where I go first. And so I think those things, saying yes, seeing his consistency of just meeting me in my yes and carrying me through when I needed him.
Yeah.
And then seeking him first and seeking him most.
Wow, that's some wisdom right there. Okay, so you are passionate about leaders functioning from a place of being healthy. Tell us more about what that means. What does it mean to operate from a place of health?
Oh, goodness. So I learned this one the hard way.
Okay.
You know, when we launched the Church of 1122, I'm a type A, driven, get a bunch of things done kind of person. And I had little kids and a husband who was also on staff full time. And I ran hard and I didn't set boundaries and I didn't pause to care much for myself. I also didn't pause much to care for my relationship with Jesus, and ministry became an idol. Without me realizing it. I would find myself thinking more about my to-do list and the things that we could do for Jesus than I did about Jesus. And God brought me to a point where he began to unravel the things that I had basically put into this big weird ball of things that needed to be untangled. Some unhealthy habits and things that he was like, this is not how we do this. And it took a season of him unraveling and helping me see, what does healthy look like? How do you do this from a place of health and be the best version of yourself for the sake of the gospel, for the sake of your family, for the sake of your friends? And so some of those healthy patterns are clear boundaries. Our staff knows you don't call me after work hours unless it's an absolute emergency. They also know I'm not going to respond to you in an email at 9:00 at night because I shut that junk down. It includes waking up early, which I know most of us don't like, but in my busy life, if I don't carve that time out to give my first fruits with Jesus to set the tone and tempo of my day, I can tell. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So can everyone
I feel
else.
I feel that deeply for myself.
It means taking a real Sabbath every week, a 24-hour time of period, not 2 hours here, an hour there. I had a great dinner. Literally a 24-hour time frame, start to finish, in a 7-day week period. So one full day of rest, of taking time off, of doing stuff that brings me joy, whatever that looks like. I mean, sometimes that's, laying on the couch watching Netflix. Sometimes that's going to the beach. Sometimes sometimes it's going to Costco because I'm like, woo, this sounds fun. But if it doesn't sound fun or
We're
life,
not doing it.
yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. And so I have some very healthy rhythms that I do in the mornings that help me better understand where I'm at. My friend Dave Ferguson started this thing called RPMs. And it's a 4-point check-in that I literally do every day. So I check in on myself. How am I doing relationally with others? Where is that at? How am I doing physically? Physically, am I taking care of myself? Mentally, are my thoughts the thoughts of Jesus, or am I freaking out, or am I tired and exhausted in my mind? And then spiritually, how am I doing with Jesus? Am I connected to him? Or am I just kind of, he's here and I check in with him and, I'm a Christian, but he's over here and I'm not really cultivating a relationship with him. And so I do RPMs every day.
That's great.
I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 5. Where am I at? And then I take whatever the lowest is and I look at what fills me and what empties me in each of those areas. And I determine what's one thing that I need to focus on in order to fill that area, in order to lift that number up. So, honestly, that's really helpful. And then journaling about why it's low and being brutally honest with myself. So those are just a few kind of.
I love that.
Yeah.
How have you seen, so now that you're equipping other leaders to practice health, why is it so important?
Oh, goodness. Our number one goal is that people would know Jesus. The way that we reflect Jesus is through our own life. And if we don't look and smell like Jesus, they're not really going to understand who he is. And if we're not healthy, they're not going to know the fullness of who he is and what a relationship looks like with him. Jesus was the beautiful example of drawing away, of going to pray, of fasting, of spending time with his inner circle, of slowing down his pace when he needed to, of saying no to the crowds when he needed to. If we can't honestly say that our relationship with Jesus, is not at the center of how we function, and I don't just mean like lip service where we say, yeah, I'm a Christian leader, I love Jesus, follow him everywhere, da-da-da-da. I mean daily practicing, making space for him to be at first and foremost on the tip of everything that we do. Walking in cadence. The Bible talks about walking in step with the Spirit. How do we walk in step with the Spirit if we're not healthy? How do we reflect Jesus if our physical well-being is not reflecting the fullness of who God created us to be, right? He didn't create us to be unhealthy in any of those areas. And so in leadership, I think the health of the leader, the health of the organization ultimately will end up reflecting that. Anybody who's involved with an organization, whether it be a church, a nonprofit, you name it, they're gonna slowly start reflecting what the leader reflects. And we don't want to reflect that to the people that we are trying to say, hey, this is what Jesus looks like.
Sure.
This is what a follower of Jesus means.
Yeah.
A follower of Jesus should be walking in peace, in joy. Like, one of the things that I had to do for a season in my life, a very rough season of my life, I put a sticky note on my computer that said, what does joy look like? And in everything that I did, whether it was a Zoom call or, creating a strategy or a podcast, it didn't matter. In every single activity I did, I would look at that sticky note. Okay, what's the joy in this? And I would pause to allow Jesus to remind me what the joy in that moment was.
Wow. Because
if we're not walking in joy in what we're doing, we're also not reflecting the Lord, right? So what are the things that are going to draw people to Jesus? It's not going to be what a great leader we are or how dynamic we are or, the 5,000 things we can get done in a day. It's going to be how we reflect the Holy Spirit in our own lives through the fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. And the fruit of the Spirit is only known in our lives if we've been with him because fruit only grows from the tree that you are. And that tree has to come from being with the Holy Spirit, and therefore the fruit shows who he is, right? And so I think it's important in everything we do. Yeah. And I would dare to say statistics are showing us the importance of healthy leaders, right? You've got churches who are splitting and falling apart and leaders who are ultimately ending up in burnout or moral failure or both because they're not healthy, because they haven't made the space and the time to make it a priority in their own life to make sure that first and foremost, they're healthy.
Okay, so before someone gets to the place of moral failure, burnout, and this goes for anyone in any industry, not just vocational ministry, what are some of the signs of unhealth? Because I can imagine you can run for a long time unhealthy, and how do you avoid getting to that place of, like I said, burnout or moral failure? What are some of those things that you can look for?
I would say, number one, you're not spending time with Jesus. And I mean the personal kind of time where it's just intimate. Yeah. I'm not talking about, I'm praying for my ministry or I'm praying for my team or, I'm praying for my family. All of those things are beautiful and great. But how about just spend time, right? So cultivating that relationship with Jesus, if that's not there, that's a big sign. That's the sign number one. If you've kind of hit autopilot and you're running on yesterday's manna or, we could go down a whole road there. Sure. But for example, my relationship with my husband, Ben, if I hit autopilot and I'm not intimate with him, can I do that for a season? Absolutely. I know him well enough. We know each other well enough that we can just kind of go into autopilot and we're just living and we're in love and we're just doing our thing. Or I can intentionally make sure that we're cultivating intimacy every single day. And out of that blossoms this beautiful and rich relationship that just continues to grow. And I would say that when that starts lacking in your relationship with Jesus, that is the biggest red flag. Secondly, I would say if you're feeling tired all the time, that's a big one. If you're feeling a lack of joy, that's a big one. If you don't have peace, like if you're constantly anxious, if your thoughts are constantly worked up in worry and what ifs and concern, that is not Jesus's way. He said his burden is light. Now, that doesn't mean that we still don't have a burden. It just means that we can cast the burden or the yoke upon him and he will carry it for us. It's still ours. It's still kind of there, but we're not carrying it any longer. He's carrying it for us. And so are you carrying things? Is there a weightiness about you that you're starting to feel that you're ignoring? And then lastly, I would say functioning out of our own strength, making decisions without being led by the Holy Spirit, doing things based out of our talents, our abilities, our skills. Like some of us have a large capacity, right? I have a pretty decent capacity and could do a lot of things on my own. When I start feeling tired, worn out, irritated, agitated, lack of joy, lack of peace, those are all good indicators of,
get back into it.
Yeah, I'm not doing healthy practices to make sure that I'm the best version of myself for the sake of the gospel.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, so one of the things that you do, and you've always been such a champion for women, just empowering and equipping women to step into all that God's called them to be. In such a world of competition and comparison. Now, this is true for men and women, but particularly women struggle with competition, comparison. Why is it so important for us to, especially as Christian women, to defeat that spirit of competition and comparison and lean into equipping and empowering each other?
It's a great question. I'll start by saying that, and I'm just going to speak directly to the female portion of this conversation. I know men have their own set of challenges and things when it comes to these areas, but because I'm a woman, I can speak a little, clearer into that. I think by nature, women tend to be to walk in insecurity, and I think, if I'm honest, I think that's the plot of the enemy is to tear down women so that we don't walk in the fullness that God created us for. If I was him, that's what I would do, because women are awesome, right? And so I think that's the one place where he kind of tramples all over women, is to create this insecurity in them, that out of that insecurity comes this need to compete or compare.
Wow, that's good.
If we as women can find our sweet spot, that our identity is not in what we do or who we are or how we look. It's not in our gifts or our talents. It's not in the color of our hair or if you can walk in heels or not. The older I get.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I know. The older I get, I put on a pair of heels and I'm like, I used to be able to walk in these. I promise at some point.
Sneakers and dresses is what I'm here for.
I can't do it. So, anyway, my point with that is that if we can remove the lie that our identity is wrapped up in any of those things, and recognize that our identity is ultimately that we are wonderfully and fearfully made, that God's works are wonderful, and that we would know that full well, then out of that place, we lose the insecurity, because I'm secure in him, right? I often have women ask me, how are you so confident? And I'm like, oh, you think so, huh?
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is my confidence does not rest in myself, thankfully. Right. I know me. My confidence should not rest in myself. Yeah. My confidence rests in my relationship with Jesus and in the Holy Spirit empowering me and him using me however he wants. In him correcting me however he wants, in him empowering the parts of myself that I feel like I'm not capable of doing things. My confidence rests in that alone. And out of that place, then I can just walk around not comparing or competing. It's no longer an issue. I know who I am in Jesus. I just have to be who he created me to be and rely on him for the spaces and places that make up all of the, there's this whole trend about I'm enough. I've heard it for years. You're enough. No, you're not.
I know, it actually makes me really mad when I see that.
Me too. I'm like, you're not.
No, actually, no, none of us are.
I'm not enough. Nor do I want to be, because never will I be.
Right.
And if we can let go of kind of that mindset and go, no, you know what? But I do know who is enough.
That's right.
And I put the weight of who I am onto him and trust that he will bring everything that I need in order for me to function the way that he's called me to function. And because of that, I don't have to worry, compare, or compete. And so in that context, it allows us to sit from a place of going, hey, ladies, you too are not enough, but you too can walk in the fullness he's created for your life so that more and more people would know Jesus. Right. And that's the ultimate goal. Like if we can take our eyes off of ourselves, this is not about us.
Right.
It is not about me. Now, listen, I am fully loved in Jesus. I am fully accepted. I am the bride of Christ. I am special, and so are you. and so is every other woman on the face of the earth. And because of that, we can all say together, man, there's a seat at the table for all of us, and we all have a role and a position to play in the gospel being made known. And out of that place, man, you get excited
so much
about
freedom.
saying, hey, Allie, you're doing this amazing podcast. What else are you going to do next? Like, that's my next challenge for you. I'm just saying on a side note, like there's just so much more that God has called women to do for the sake of his gospel out of a place of intimacy with him and an empowerment through him. That then puts us in this position where we realize it's not about us.
Okay.
And I have everything I need. And it gives me space to go, yeah, and so do you, and I'm going to call you out and call you forward.
Yeah.
I want to see you walk in the fullness God's created you for.
Yeah. So for the woman listening who struggles with that, struggles with comparison, and maybe for the first time is hearing, oh, maybe that's rooted in insecurity, what are some of the steps that she can take towards that freedom?
I think along the way, I know it probably sounds super simple and silly, but I mean, number one, read the word, get in the word. It renews your mind.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, our biggest battle is in our thoughts, and literally, it's not having conversations with your pastor. It's not having conversations with multiple friends to try to help them, boost you up. All of those things are great and useful. Yes, do those things. But at the end of the day, we have everything we need to renew our mind by just reading the word.
That's right.
Just get in the word, read it, let it renew your mind. It also says that the word does not return void. So once it gets in there, it's going to produce some things in you that you can't do for yourself when it comes to how you think.
Right.
So that's number one. And then I would say number two for me, anytime I would find myself, and still to this day, I mean, in the spaces and the places that I get to sit in. I mean, I just had a call with this guy that is just ridiculous. I won't go into who he is or what his name is, but it was one of those calls where as I was heading into it, I started to get nervous and I was like, wow, I'm intimidated, and started to do all those things of like, ooh, feeling lesser than. And then I began to realize I've got my eyes on myself. That's not what this call's about. This is kingdom work and kingdom business. What can we do together for the sake of the kingdom? And when I take my eyes off myself and put them back on, what can we do for the sake of the kingdom? So to simplify that, I would say, if you find yourself in one of those places where you feel really insecure and you're having a hard time kind of jumping over that hurdle, because some of us, the insecurity is deep and real, and sometimes it was kind of put upon us by words people spoke over us or life experiences or a bad relationship. All of that is very real. But I will say one of the antidotes is to dedicate your life to helping others. And so you find yourself in a place of insecurity, find one thing that you can do for somebody else and just start doing that over and over and over again. And you'll start finding that you're starting to boost your own confidence because you recognize, oh, wait, I do have some value to add here. Yeah. I can be used by God. I was created for that same purpose of knowing God and making him known. And there's a call in my life, and I can actually fulfill it. And so that's what I try to do. When I start feeling insecure, I literally purposely try to serve somebody else to take my eyes off myself, and it breeds confidence. I
was about to say, it gets you out of your own head.
That's right, out of your funk.
And when you can just look outward, you realize, okay, this isn't either as big of a deal, or you just got to get out of the hamster wheel of that cycle and just see, and then you get perspective like, oh, I'm just a very small piece of this.
That's right.
It's not all about me.
That's right.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so whether man or woman, we talked a little bit about calling earlier, and I love that you are redefining what is calling. Really, we all have the same, you said you called it purpose or general calling. We're all called to make disciples. But how can someone discern what their unique piece of that is, what their unique call is?
And so this is what I'm really passionate about. Because everyone on the face of the earth has something to contribute when it comes to the story of the gospel and helping that gospel be made known. So I think some really simple things that you can do. I remember years ago when I was wrestling with this same question for myself. I sat down and I made a list of all the things I'm passionate about. And I didn't limit it to like ministry per se. I literally wrote out things like, I love the outdoors. I love camping. I love women. All the things that encompassed kind of what I was passionate about, what made me come alive. And I took that list and began to compare it to my life and started to go, okay, where am I not doing the things that I'm passionate about, and how can I apply them to my everyday life? And I began to see some shifts and some changes. And so at that time in my life, Ben and I, we were missionaries, and we would literally go into the jungles in Guatemala, and we would put on a backpack and we would hike into the villages and we would set up tents and we would share the gospel with those communities. And looking back, I'm going, man, when I sat down and wrote my passions list, that included things like I love the outdoors and I love camping. I can look back at that moment where I asked God, would you use these? Because I love doing this. How do I incorporate it into my call? And how does that help define my call? And fast forward, not even a year later, I found myself in those spaces and places where I was camping in the middle of the jungle to share the gospel with people. And it excited me to go, wow, I wrote out my passions list. I said, hey, God, where's the disconnect, and what do I need to say yes to and step into? So I would say that's a part of it. There's a book called Next Generation Leader. It's an old school Andy Stanley book. And it has some practical practices that you can do in that book where you ask others closest to you about yourself. That was really big for me in my 20s. And then actually when we launched the Church of 1122, we brought that book back around and did it again. It just kind of helps you understand what you're good at. I remember the first time that somebody answered the questions in that book on my behalf. And one of the things that somebody said was, you're really good at planning things. Like you can see the big vision and then map out how to accomplish the vision. Well, in my mind, I thought everyone could do that. I was like, well, can't we all do that? That's what we all do, like,
yeah.
And then begin to realize, that's unique to me. That's not necessarily as easy for everyone, right? And so it helped me understand my wiring and how I'm created. I would say understanding your personality, understanding what you're good at that other people might not be good at, answering the question, what do people come to you about that maybe they don't go to others about? What kind of advice do they seek out from you and why? That kind of helps define what you're good at. So those are some really simple steps to take.
So what about the person that they're in a job and they're feeling like this is where I'm at right now, but it's not maybe what they feel like their unique call is in the kingdom, and they're just anxious for more, but God's placed them where they're at. What are like some little steps where they're at right in that moment that they can take?
So I get the fortunate opportunity over and over again to meet with leaders whose story started out just like that. And these are not church leaders per se. They are not network or denomination leaders. They're not nonprofit leaders. They are businessmen and women who are in the middle of their job going, I think there's more. What do I do?
Yeah.
And they begin to ask God that question. That was step one. Ask God, what's the more here? That's probably the most dangerous question you can ask God. God,
if you're going to ask that, you need to be prepared for his answer.
I mean, just recently,
camping and sharing the gospel in the Guatemalan jungles.
I mean, recently I did hear like the Lord challenging me to say what else, and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to."
Like I'm good.
Yeah, but that's an honest question.
Yeah.
If you're feeling that, here's what I'm going to say: the workplace. I would give anything, not anything, but I'm a little jealous of people who get the opportunity to be in a workplace environment where the majority don't know Jesus. because you've got people to your left and to your right that you work with every day, that you get the unique opportunity to disciple them without them understanding that they're even being discipled.
Yeah, wow.
You get the unique opportunity to point them to Jesus right there in their own context, where it's comfortable, where it's relational, where it's how Jesus did ministry. And so I'm a little jealous, first of all, of that person. But secondly, I would ask the question, what else? And that does not mean quit your job and go start 100 things or quit your job and go into full-time ministry. We do not need people to quit their jobs and be in vocational ministry. We actually need more people to live on mission right where they're at and ask God how to be creative in those contexts. I know people who have started, hey, let's start meeting at 5:00 on Friday and we'll have a drink together and have some spiritual conversations. Out of that, literally have grown simple churches that have been birthed out of those moments and movements. And so there's so much divine opportunity there in the workplace. Don't overlook it and don't be limited to what you've always seen or done. Get creative and allow God to kind of push you out of the boat a little bit because you have a mission field. They're not a project. Let me just say that. People around you are not projects. They are people waiting to know Jesus and you know him. And so how can you get creative in those spaces and places and ask God to show you?
Oh, that's so good. Okay, so last question. You've been a working mom since having kids, right?
Correct.
So how do you pursue what you feel God calling you to do vocationally and keep your family first and a priority and be a present mom or dad? How do you do both? Can you do both?
Yes, you 100% can do both.
Asking for a friend here.
Yes, you can do both. You totally can do both. I would say the conversation around health is really important as a part of this conversation. Having boundaries around your family is very important. So one of the things that Ben and I determined when we stepped into a little faster pace was that we would always be there to take our kid to school and pick them up when they were little. Whatever that looked like. We just would try to make it, whatever we needed to adjust, we tried to make those kind of simple things work. I know not everyone can do that. And so some of the things I would say, boundaries, figure out what those boundaries are that help you be the best version of yourself and be the most present. There's a big difference between being in the room with your kids and being present with your kids. Being in the room with your family and being present with them. And if you're finding yourself where you don't have the mental capacity or the energy at the end of a workday to be present, you probably need to make some shifts around some healthy rhythms in your life. But for me, again, I've learned along the way, I've not gotten it right every time. Literally, Kaya and I, my 19-year-old and I, are talking about writing a book together around what we did right and what we didn't do right. Of like, hey, what if we were brutally honest and talked about the things that we did really well and the things that we didn't do well? And so I just put it out there. So
now
that means we're going to do it.
happen.
So we are going to do it because I think it's really important, number one, for parents to understand you're not perfect and you're not going to get it right all the time. And it's not always going to feel easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to say yes to Jesus and what he's called you into, both in your family and in the context of vocational ministry. And so, but some things, healthy boundaries, a Sabbath with family, or sometimes without your family when it's needed for yourself, so that the rest of the week you can be the best version of yourself. Vacations. The number of people that I know who don't really take vacations is staggering to me in vocational ministry. I am like, what in the world are we doing here? Like, I will take your vacation time for you, like, what are we doing? So taking intentional vacations with your family to enjoy each other and laugh together. Moms, take the hat off of trying to plan everything and make it perfect, because you will be exhausted and will not enjoy it.
And let down, probably.
Yes, and by the end of it, feel like you need a vacation from the vacation. Right. We've all been there. I learned the hard way to take that hat off and go, you know what? I
That's really good.
don't have to fill every moment and make
Yeah.
it just perfect. We just have to be present and together. That's really
great.
what your family wants.
Yeah.
Your house. Okay, so I was that woman who thought that my house had to be perfect for so long. I mean, we'd have people stop by every day, and so my house always had to be just, like everybody. And I would get to the point where I'd be like, "Clean the house," and I'd be screaming before people walked in the door.
Right.
My kids can attest to this, okay? And then people would walk in the door and I'd be like,
Hi, welcome to our perfect home. It always looks like this.
Look how beautiful we are. I learned along the way that's ridiculous. My house now looks like we live there. If you came by my home today, you'd go, oh, you live here. And I'd say, yeah, I absolutely
sure do.
live here. And I don't spend 100% of my time trying or what little energy I may have to contribute to making my house perfect. Instead, I spend it being present. And I think that's a big shift because as women and moms, we put so much pressure on ourselves to have everything just so. We compare again, or we don't compare and we have this expectation we put on ourselves that no one else actually in your whole family has of you.
Right.
They don't care if it looks just so. They
Sure.
actually would prefer it not.
Yeah.
So I would say just, let go of the control, be present, have some clear boundaries, spend quality time, and recognize when you're running yourself ragged and make a change.
Yeah.
Do something about it. Don't just sit in it.
So good. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Just pour all of the wisdom on me. Okay. Any final encouragement for, any of the topics that we've talked about today, but just people, who are just out there, they're just trying their best to just live a life that glorifies God and loving their family. Just any final encouragement for them.
Yeah. I would say don't complicate things. Just keep it really simple. Love God. Love the people he's put around you. Love them well. Love yourself. Take care of yourself. Love yourself enough that you would treat yourself the way that you would treat the people that you love the most in your world, which I think often we don't do. Yeah. Slow down, breathe, spend time laughing, spend time enjoying life. Smell the flowers. Don't just plant them and then move on. Actually spend time celebrating and enjoying them. Simplify. Jesus uses us, but he's not dependent upon us.
Amen.
So we don't have to do more. We actually should be doing less in order for us to actually reflect who he is, rather than filling our plate and comparing busyness and success with what actually is significant, right? So success and significant are two different things. Adding significance to the world around us, it's a whole different approach. Being successful, based on the world standards, looks very different. And I dare to say those same people are looking for significance out of their own lives, right? And so slow down. If you're finding yourself going too slow, then maybe step out of the boat and say yes to.
Come on. Thank you so much.
You're
this
welcome.
is incredible.
Thank you for having me.
You'll be back. I feel there's more to unpack here, but thank you so much.
Well, and I can't wait to see what's next for you, Allie.
We'll see.
Yeah. And anybody who's listening, I just encourage you, way to go to take the time to listen, to invest in yourself. Well done.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Neighbors is produced by Logger Creative and Taylor Minning. Music by Austin and Lindsay Adamak. Artwork by Wesley Parsons. And motion graphics by Robbie Burns.
Living to love life. Living to love life. You have loved me. You show me brighter days. New mercies every morning. You never shy away to tell me that you're for me. How could I repay this? Whatever can I do but offer